I loved God, but I didn't let God love me. So I can only let you in this much, and then anything beyond that circle, like, I got this. I had already seen some signs that something wasn't right, but I felt like I'm supposed to do this to be obedient, and God will just work everything else out. I guess this is what God wants for me. I saw the red flags, I heard the sirens, but I kept pummeling through because I was lonely. My self-esteem was impacted. And the pressure to marry, to not sin. Society puts a lot of pressure on you to have certain milestones or boxes checked off. I had the pleaser controller part, right? And so I felt like to please, I could stay in the relationship. I could rescue this person.
Welcome back to Candid Convos with Nurse E. We are so glad that you have joined us today. I have a very special guest. Every guest that I have is very, very special because I love them dearly. I appreciate their time. I appreciate their stories. I appreciate their journeys and their testimonies. Today, I have my good sister here, Alishia Potter. I will get into in a minute how we met, but this is a mighty woman of God.
Oh, thank you.
Yes, a prayer warrior, an awesome realtor, just an overall powerful woman that is just loved. I went to her recent birthday party, and I mean, everybody had nothing but good things to say about her. And it was just so amazing and so grateful to be a part of. And so I'm going to let her take some time to introduce herself, brag on herself.
Oh my goodness.
Let y'all know who she is.
First of all, it is an honor and a joy to be here on this platform. Yes. Thank you for providing this space where, people can just have candid conversations, but also be educated.
Yeah.
I love your passion for health and wellness from a very practical perspective. So thanks for all you do. I'm not really a big deal. My name's Alishia. I'm a mom, a wife of an amazing purpose partner. Shout out to DJ Randy P.
Yes!
My husband, Randolph Potter. We've been together 14 years, married 11 years. We have a blended family, Caleb and Sarah, and they're 23 and 24. And I just love God. I love people. And I love just really turning pain into purpose, right? In my own life, and then helping others to do the same. I've been in real estate for, 8 years. But prior to that, I was a teacher by trade, taught high school, also did some workforce development. And in my own journey of going through divorce and becoming homeless, I authored a book for women called Woman Will Thou Be Made Whole, Healing from the Wounds of Divorce. And birthed from that was my nonprofit organization, Empowered Women Ministries. And so we were founded in 2007. We became international in 2015. And our mission is to help single women break cycles of unhealthy relationships, lead emotionally healthy lifestyles, and live their purpose. And so that's me in a nutshell.
That sounds like
my new grandbaby.
Yes.
Have to mention her. So
I was going to mention her. I was like, I didn't want to call you a grandma. You know what I'm saying? Because everybody may have their turn, but you have an addition to the family. Yes. And how many months is she now?
She just turned 4 months. And she's like a ball of obsession. We're so obsessed with her. I just want to eat her for dessert. I find ways to find myself in my daughter's city. Like, hey, I'm dropping something off at the mall, and I'm stopping by to see the baby. Do you need any help? You need me? I need me to babysit. So
How is she? Does she receive that well? Is she good with that?
She does. She has a really great balance. She went back to work for the first time in 4 months this week.
Wow.
And so I've been leaving her alone, just letting her do her adulting.
Figure it out. Yeah.
Which she loves to figure things out on her own.
Yes, anyway, that's so good. That's so good. You have trained up a child in the way they should go.
Jesus, help me.
So yes, that is wonderful, wonderful.
For sure.
And it sounds like to me you're a big deal.
Wow, thank you.
I'm looking at a miracle. I'm experiencing a miracle. And so you are a big deal.
For sure.
Yes.
To God be the glory.
To God be the glory.
I'm really grateful that he trusted me with a trial. God knows who he can trust with a trial. That's why he said to Satan, have you considered
Yes.
my servant Job. So God has us on his mind because he knows who he can produce miracles through.
Yes.
And who will give him back the glory. And so I'm grateful for that.
Yes. I have just learned to accept that. It was tough, but
For sure.
I have learned to accept that I have been chosen. And just like we read about these different stories in the Word of God, we are a story, just like they are.
I love that.
Do you understand what I'm saying?
that.
And we don't look at it. We're just looking at them and we're just looking at what they've gone through. But it's like the Lord wants to do the very same thing in our lives that he did in their lives.
Right. And put us in a book that's underscored by faith, right?
Yes.
Hebrews 11, before we even, we read all of, or I don't know which chapter. If you go to Hebrews 11 and you don't see what I'm about to tell you, don't be like, she's not really a Christian. But in the book of Hebrews, right? There is a chapter where God outlines every single name, right, in history, Abraham, all these people who, right, their faith was counted as righteousness, but that they were just mentioned in a book that talks about faith. They didn't ask for that, but God knew that he could trust them with that. So like, your book is miracle. My book is miracle. Your book may be faith or healing, where your name is mentioned and God can brag on you and encourage somebody else with your story. And really, that's what it's all about. Our life is not our own.
It's not.
So pretty exciting. You're a pretty big deal, as well.
But we're not here to talk about me. Okay. We'll talk about that later. But we want to jump into your journey, your story. It's a pretty big one, but we want to take a part of it and we want to digest it and make it practical for my audience and everything. And so you mentioned that you were married before.
I was. And
that you didn't get into a whole lot of details about that, but you're no longer married. And so we kind of
to him.
But
I'm married to the right one this time. You got to practice with the wrong one. To get the right one, but don't do what I did.
Right. And so that's what the video is about.
Do what I did.
Let's avoid that, and find the purpose partner.
And
so we want to kind of shadow in on domestic violence and what that looked like, what that journey looked like, and what signs you saw that could have that you could have taken heed to prevent what happened. And then what, not just his signs, but also what were your signs that attracted you to him and allowed for that dynamic to unfold?
I love the question. I'm going to start by giving your viewers a little bit of data, and then I'm going to back into the answer to your question. So just alone in the U.S., women who die in domestic violence relationships, and we hear the word domestic violence and we envision something like really, really violent, as we should. So I'm going to use violence and abuse interchangeably.
Okay.
So approximately 1 in 4 women in the United States experience severe intimate partner violence and abuse in their lifetime. On average, 1 in 6 female homicide victims is killed by a current or former intimate partner.
Yes.
So that accounts for about 1,200 to 1,500 women killed annually in the U.S. You may know somebody, I may know somebody. That's 1 in 6 people in your break room at your job, or 1 in 6 people in the aisle when you're in the supermarket, right? And then globally, 1 in 5 homicides of women in 2021 were related to intimate partner violence, according to the World Health Organization. Now, I'm going to bring us down to women who didn't realize that they were in a domestic violence relationship.
Wow.
Studies suggest that 1 in 3 women, again, that's in your break room, at your job, in the supermarket, at your church, on the row, sitting next to you, who experience emotional abuse or coercive control, do not even recognize it as abuse initially.
Right.
This can be due to the gradual nature of psychological manipulation that's involved in and control in abusive relationships. Research has found that 2 in 5 women in controlling relationships, they don't even immediately perceive the behavior as abuse until it escalates.
Wow.
That was me. Or others pointed out. And then lastly, a survey from the National Domestic Violence Hotline indicates that 3 in 10 women only recognize their abusive nature of the relationship when they are given information about what constitutes abuse.
Wow.
Again, that was me. So these statistics really do illustrate the widespread and unrecognized nature of domestic abuse and really highlight and underscore the need for intervention as well as education.
Yeah.
So you were going to say something.
I was going to say something, but I don't know if it should, kind of go later. I don't want it to mess anything up, but it was about how often do people point out that someone.
I love that.
Isn't that a good?
Sure.
Yeah. So if you want to talk about it now, you can, but if you want to talk about it later, you can talk about it later.
Let me process that.
Yeah.
Let me process that because there's a lot of fear and intimidation, right, that people feel just in the relationship. And then those who see it may feel like they don't want to offend their loved one or lose their loved one. And I think also there's a sense of denial on both ends, people who perceive it or people who are in it are like, well, it's not that bad. He just called her a name. So I think that has a lot to do with it. But to back into your question, what signs did I see? When did I see them? I'm going to say that I didn't see signs of domestic abuse because, or that I was getting into a relationship with that would have led to abuse because I didn't identify abuse as being what I know it to be today.
Okay.
Again, you watch movies, you see women, not people, getting punched and hit. And I also want to just indicate and put a pin in this that domestic abuse is not gender-based. So men are abused as well as women, as well as children. So, but when I say women, it's because I've worked mostly with women and, my own experience. And so I would say the red flags that I ignored were red flags that I was getting into a highly unhealthy relationship. And what made me a magnet for that, Ebony, was my own insecurities, my own need to be needed, right? So that codependency part, I need someone to depend on me. And then also my need to fill voids, not dealing with the abandonment issues that I had, daddy issues. I'm looking for daddy in every relationship. And so, for me personally, I became a born again Christian at the age of 19, gave my heart to the Lord on the altar of a Baptist church with just me. And shout out to Pastor Francis Rogers, who led me to Christ. So I like to say that I loved God, but I didn't let God love me. I loved God, but I didn't let God love me because God was a male representing to me other males that had hurt me. So I can only let you in this much. And then anything beyond that circle, like I got this and you just come along.
Right.
So the relationship part, I saw the red flags, I heard the sirens, but I kept pummeling through because I was lonely. My self-esteem was impacted. And I want to say that I was in a controlled environment as well. And we can dive into that a little further in the discussion, but I was already in a controlling environment. So
in the relationship or the control environment.
Okay. So we'll just get there now. Okay. So, let me put the disclaimer out here that I believe in the church. The church was built by God. The church is us as well. And the church was created for us to have community and to make an impact in other people's lives cohesively. Also, let me put the disclaimer out there that we live in a broken world, and so there's broken people.
Yeah.
And broken people can be leaders of churches. They can be leaders of your organization that you work for. They can be leaders at the hospital that you go to, right? Broken people are everywhere. And so I just happen to be in a church organization being led by some broken people, primarily a female pastor who I learned later on was in an abusive marriage. And so I'll put also the disclaimer out there that this was over 20 years ago. And today she could be fully recovered and healed and living her life in a very holistic, not holistic, but a whole way, like she's healed
way.
I don't know that. I'm not in relationship with her anymore, and I can only speak to my experiences. And so I became kind of victim to my own issues, but then to the environment I was in with, this is your wife, this is your husband, don't marry that person, marry this person. And the pressure to marry to kind of, I guess, not sin, right? So that kind of combination of factors, I had already seen some signs that something wasn't right, but I felt like I'm supposed to do this to be obedient. And God will just work everything else out. We'll figure it out. I guess this is what God wants for me. So I was 23 years old as well. And society puts a lot of pressure on you as a young person, Christian or not, to have certain milestones or boxes checked off. So
at certain ages.
The box checked off of graduating from college, done. I needed now the box checked off of having this husband and creating a family to be checked off as well. So I would say that I just ignored a lot of red flags. But in conversations, he would say things like, just one conversation I really remember him saying is, I have so much anger in me, I could kill somebody. And I just let that fly over because I learned through Dr. Ron Elmore's book, How to Love a Black Man, which anybody of any race can read that book and really glean from it. But he was specifically talking to Black women about Black men. We as women sometimes have these mechanisms in relationships we utilize: pleaser, controller, avoider. I can't remember the other two. But I had the pleaser controller part, right? And so I felt like to please, I could stay in the relationship. Oh, rescuer was the other one. I could rescue this person. So I just, even though I heard that, I just, kind of let it go. But as the relationship started to progress, a lot of that anger definitely became prevalent.
Yeah. So that was the biggest sign that you saw with him, and then the signs that you saw within yourself. And then the community that you were surrounded in was saying, this needs to be continued.
This is the person that you're supposed to be with, right? So I would say that, I didn't know I was in an abusive situation until after the separation and divorce. Well, the separation, divorce period, the co-parenting journey was full of a lot of control. If you go to, I can provide it for your viewers. There's a website where you could learn about the power and control wheel.
Maybe we can put that link in the description.
The hotline.org. It's the Domestic Violence Hotline's website. But on the power and control wheel, you will see behaviors that, because domestic abuse is really patterns of behavior that are used to either gain or maintain control in the relationship. And so, like in the marriage, I noticed there was a lot of competitiveness underscored by jealousy. And then once we had our first child, that got exacerbated. And so there was kind of some control issues around, what constitutes, I guess, good parenting. Well, I do this my way, you do this your way. This is my child, the possessive pronouns, my child, it's not our child. So I started to feel like, am I in this marriage to give him children? And so as we started to progress through some really tough and hard conversations, because I felt unloved in the relationship, and I used to ask him, like, why did you marry me? And I remember him saying it didn't matter who I married, I just wanted kids. So, once Soraya came, and she came at the most difficult time. The whole entire marriage was difficult. But I mean, at the time where we were on our second separation, because we separated once we got married the first year, we didn't make it to the first anniversary. I noticed in the marriage control around like who I could get close to in his family and who I could not. And so that led to the first physical altercation. When we separated, his dad had called me and asked me why. And I was trying not to tell him. I had a really close relationship with his family. Still do. Still do to this day, 20 years later. But he was really trying to control that. And so I wouldn't tell him why. And then he kind of, ended up getting it out of me. And I guess he went and had a conversation with him, as a dad should. Right. And that really just exacerbated his anger. He had come over the house to get the vacuum. This is not funny. I'm glad I can laugh at this now, but I opened the door and you called my dad. You said this to my dad, and my dad has health issues, and I'm yelling at him. He's yelling at me. And then I remember him just shoving me into the couch. And so that was the first physical encounter. But honestly, can I just be real? Like, I'm from the hood. In the hood, women, we don't say we're being abused. We just be like, we had a fight. You hit me, I'm gonna hit you back.
That was it. That's it.
Let me go pick up something and throw it at you.
Right.
When you grow up in a culture of violence around you,
you don't know the difference.
Yeah, I grew up in, the streets of Boston, Massachusetts, and straight from Franklin Hill. You can just Google Franklin Hill, Franklin Hill Projects, Franklin Hill Giants, a lot of gang violence. That's just what we did to survive, So not that I was in abusive relationships as a kid, right. Or nor did I see it in my household, but the culture of just survival. Right. So for me, I didn't feel like a victim. It's like, he pushed me, shoved me into the couch, and I don't remember what I did. I blacked out. I might have hit him back, might have kicked him. I don't know. But when I was pregnant with Soraya, this was the next year. My kids are a year and 3 days apart. So this was the following year. I'm pregnant again. And it just got increasingly worse. What's his is his, what's mine is mine. And as we was having a disagreement about a bar of soap, and I threw a plastic container at him, and he lunged at me. And when he lunged at me, I ended up on the couch and him sitting on my stomach. And so I remember jumping up, and I'm like, I am literally pregnant, and you sat on my stomach. And that's when I knew that I had to just put blinders on and get out. Again, not thinking I'm in anything abusive, just this wasn't the right marriage for me to be in. Right. I knew that. I ignored it. I knew this guy had issues. And so I walked up, got the baby out the crib, Caleb. He was 5 months old, put him in the baby car seat. And I just ran for my life. And you can't exchange anything for peace. I didn't have answers. I understood in the environment I was in. We don't do divorce here. You don't do divorce. I couldn't hear any of that. Right. What I saw is my life 10 years forward. Yeah. That it would be this. And so... Or worse. Yeah. And it did get worse. Maya Angelou said, when people show you who they are, believe them the first time. When they show you who they are, believe them the first time. Right. And so I think that a lot of people stay in relationships, for the children. I didn't want my children to grow up without a dad in the home. Right. But I realized I couldn't. I'm going to grow up with a dad in the home and see this. Right. Or do I want them to grow up without a dad? Which of the two evils do I want to choose? Exactly. It didn't get physical to me. I mean, I guess that was physical, but, during the co-parenting period, he would use, I want to pull up the power and control wheel. He would use the court systems to as a form of abuse.
And what does that look like?
So, threatening to take the children away from me, creating scenarios like we were supposed to reconcile. I'm looking for places to live under the understanding that he's also doing the same. And then I end up in a homeless shelter because he just left me kind of hanging. I'm pulling up the power and control wheel. I really need to highlight this. And so when I end up in the homeless shelter, he lets me know that he needs to speak to me. So he arranges this meeting, and in the meeting, he says to me, there was nothing I could do to prevent your situation from happening. But what you can do is let the kids come with me till you get yourself together. And so I'm at my lowest, and I feel like I'm supposed to do this because I'm a horrible mom. I ended up in this homeless shelter. Under the power and control wheel, that's using intimidation and using coercion and threats. So I talked to my pastor at the time. I'm like, I'm just going to let the kids go with him. I'm homeless. She's like, no, you don't ever leave your children. Keep your children with you. And so I end up in the homeless shelter. And so that's when he threatened to take me to court for the children. His parents had winter coats for the children and sent them through him to bring to me. He refused to give me the winter coats and clothing because I was in the shelter. So using coercion and threats, using intimidation, using economic abuse, that's on the power and control wheel, not giving me money for child support, telling me you need to go to the courts if you want money, go apply for child support, he used to say. Using emotional abuse, making her think she's crazy, playing mind games. So once the divorce was final, of course, I finally filed for the divorce. He was very religious. He wouldn't file for the divorce, but neither would you come home to your family. So I filed for the divorce. Divorce was final, and the Lord blessed me to become a homeowner in that process. But he called me one day, and he was so disappointed. He was so disappointed. I couldn't believe this is year 5. This is court battles happening. Him telling the people in the church that I was abusing him, that he was scared of me. That's why he left me, because I abused him. And so therefore, using isolation. Therefore, when he was doing that, people were starting to isolate themselves from me.
So the question that I had earlier, you basically answered as far as, so people speaking up. Nobody spoke up or identified the type of situation that you were in.
I don't think that people knew or understood it to be abusive. You understand?
Yes.
That's why we have a need for education.
Got you. Okay.
Because
what abuse looks like.
Only people that are in this know about the power and control wheel. Right. And they know about the power and control wheel by calling the domestic violence hotline, or maybe they're a domestic violence advocate. The average general person.
Got you.
I just read 3 things on here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. There's 8 components to what constitutes domestic abuse. And there's just not enough education out there about it to even know, to say, girl, I mean, everybody knew something wasn't right, but they would be like, oh, well, that's just him. And at the end of the day, if I'm not showing up anywhere with a black eye, you don't really know.
Yeah. Okay.
You don't know your coworker, your sister, your best friend. You have no idea.
Yeah.
You have no idea. So we need more education and awareness.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
And I just appreciate you just taking the time out just to talk about this, because I think that the biggest point that I've gotten from this is like not assuming that people should know that you have a whole situation.
Yeah.
I think too, when you talk about the things like you don't have the black eye, but you've got the emotional abuse, you've got the isolation, you've got the manipulation, all of those things. we know it's off, but we're not equating it with abuse. And when someone shares that with us, we just like, well, you just need to pray, or you just need to this, or you just needed that. And when you're in a church environment, because it's not the black guy, they're encouraging you to stay in it as well.
Yeah. Sure.
And I think it's difficult to navigate, especially in the church space.
It is. Yeah. And also, people perpetuate cycles based on what they've been through, encourage cycles. You know, if I go back to my statement earlier, with my pastor at the time being a victim of domestic abuse herself, which is why, and I mean, I wasn't the only marriage in the church, right? With this situation. I mean, you know, some of her relatives who were males, were in marriages where they were physically abusive to their wives. And so, but like you enable it, because you yourself are a victim. So it does run really deep.
It does.
And when you're in a generation, right? I think she's a baby boomer, from the baby boomer generation. So that generation, we don't talk about it. We don't go to no counseling. And it's my business, and I may tell you on the side just to, you know, just so you understand, you know, but we're not going to go make this public. We're not going to have any workshops or seminars about this. And certainly not going to encourage you to go to the police. You know, further down the line, I got remarried, but the co-parenting part of the relationship just became increasingly abusive. But go ahead.
But no, I just wanted to say that you unfortunately were what is the word the pioneer.
That's good.
You probably didn't look at it like that at the time, but you were the pioneer saying, hey, this is not okay. This is not normal. And although, you know, other people are choosing to continue to stay in this dynamic, I know that this isn't what the Lord has for me. And me and the Lord are going to have to work this out, because I can't stay in this.
I again, turning pain into purpose and understanding that God will always allow Romans 8:28 to find itself back in, you know, it's going to make a full circle. We know all things work together for good to them who love God and who are the called according to his purpose. God has purpose. He doesn't waste pain. But I'm going to say what was really, really powerful for me, and my awakening came when I launched Empowered Women Ministries. And we had our first empowerment session. So we would fulfill our mission through empowerment sessions called support groups, but we can't get you to a support group because you're too bougie. So we got to call it something cute, like an empowerment session. Because I understood that, right, it's not just me. This can't be just me. Like I have a career. I'm a teacher. You know, she's a pastor. This person here is a nurse. This person here is a correction officer. All these successful women, you know, women making six figures I've met who were in intimate partner abuse marriages and relationships. We just put the red lipstick on, the suit on, and we just keep going. So that's what we know how to do. And I recognize, you know, there is a mask we're wearing, and we've got to take that off.
That's it.
We've got to be emotionally healthy here, so that we can have the abundant life that God wants us to have. It's not just looking successful from the outside, but having success from the inside out. And so it was like, how could I reach these women? So our very first empowerment session back in 1998, we had 12 women show up, God's number of order and government. And these women, 98% of them were women who were churched. And they were one after the other, because we had the circle. We would sit in a circle. I have a master's degree in counseling, and the dynamics that I learned in counseling, I would bring into the group. And so in the group, it was, where are you today? Because God gave me the understanding through my healing journey that we have to stay present in three areas: where I am personally, where I am emotionally, and where I am spiritually. So that we can continue, so that we can address those things and heal, but then stay on a path of healing and wholeness, right? When God asked Adam and Eve, where are you? He didn't ask them, where are you, because I don't know where you are. He asked them, where are you, because he was trying to pull out transparency. If I can pull transparency out of you and help you open yourself up
Yes.
to being truthful about where you are in your life,
Right.
then I can send the help you need.
Amen.
I can send the release and the freedom that you need. But you first got to open up and be honest and confess where you are.
Yeah.
So that's how we ran the group.
Right.
Where are you today? And so as the women started saying where they were, many of them were talking about being abused by their pastor husband, by their deacon husband. I'm like, really? I mean, like physically, like I don't put domestic abuse on a hierarchy or nor do I compare. But I do want to say I've not experienced the worst of it. I know women who have had to go into hiding, okay? I know a woman right now whose daughter was murdered by her domestic partner and left 4 kids behind after he shot himself after killing her. This is real. She's on Capitol Hill now, lobbying for legislation for grandparents who now have to she's taking care of these 4 kids, right? So, but that's when I became aware. And so I didn't feel like I had the enough information and education to help these women who many of them were victims of domestic abuse. So I bring in a domestic violence liaison, a woman from my job at the time who was a survivor. And she was a volunteer with the domestic violence program and a program called Weaver, Women Against Emotional Abuse, something to that nature. So I brought her in to just bring education in and awareness and liaison, and she introduced the power and control wheel. And when I read that wheel, I'm like, that's me. Oh my God. Oh, I've been through that. I'm going through that right now. And so that's when I became aware and became heightened to what I was dealing with. All the entire time my children were under the 18, my ex-husband continued to use the courts as a form of abuse, bringing me before judges for putting braces on their teeth and just crazy stuff, crazy stuff. But then in the court order, he wouldn't do what was,
required
exactly.
On his end.
But I'm in so much fear and intimidation that I'm not going to bring him to court. I just want peace. I'm not, I would just let him do what he was doing because I was just so scared and intimidated. Right. And it was wearing down my self-worth. But I want to say that because of the people around him continuing to embolden him and not holding him accountable, many people know the things he was doing. Many people in our personal circle, we had the same friends. But like I said, as I started when I left the church, he took me to court for leaving the church. She changed her religion, right? So, okay. So, but my point is, in 2015, he put his hands on me at a drop-off. And I'm remarried, okay? I'm someone else's wife. But he had been so empowered by the court system who didn't believe really, he can come in the courts with his tie on and his pants, around his waist. And so therefore, you don't believe he's lying. You believe he's telling the truth. And so, I'm at a drop-off without my husband one weekend. And again, he used to just kind of do what he wanted to do. And so he's calling me to, I guess, tell me that he didn't have time to have the kids this weekend. And I wouldn't answer his phone. I'm already in the area. I had moved out the state. So courts ordered me to bring the children to him. The children would bring him back on a Sunday. Okay, fine. I'm in the area. I'm ignoring his calls. He's been blowing up my phone all day. No, what you gonna do is you gonna have the kids this weekend and you just gonna figure it out. That's what I'm thinking in my mind. So I dropped the kids off. He wasn't home. And I went out to dinner with some friends. I realized I left my key to the house with our son. So I'm like, oh, great. Now I've got to return his call because I got to get my key from our son. So I call our son. I'm like, hey, I'm coming to get the key. And the goal was for him to bring it to me outside. So he did. But he said, Dad wants to talk to you. And so then he comes outside and he's like, yeah, I've been calling you. I've been calling you all day. I'm like, I know. Yeah. So, are you going to come inside this house so I can talk to you? I didn't want to go inside of his house. But again, the intimidation, the control, I was afraid of him. I'm so embarrassed to say that. I was afraid of this little guy, And so because of all of the threats, and just the way he made me look to people. And also now the children are of age, so things that he would say to them about me. I just really wanted to always show that I was keeping the peace. So I went in the house. I should not have. I went in the house, and he proceeds to go back and forth with me about, what he desires to do this weekend and how he's going to drop them off back early. He's got this and that to do. And I was putting my foot down. I was trying to, I'm going to take control.
Right.
I'm like, no, you're not going to do that. And so he starts to elevate his voice, and the children come out of the bedroom into the hallway, and he stops talking. And I said, no, let them see who you really are. And I couldn't even get the word out of my mouth. I couldn't get the word R out of my mouth before he grabbed me. And he was pushing me, get out of my house, get out of my house. He was pushing me out of his door. When he was pushing me out the door opened, and there was no railing.
Right.
So I was trying to hold on to the doorpost. I remember trying to hold on so I don't fall off the stairs. And I was injured.
Yeah.
It was nothing but God that I was injured. And I just remember my daughter. I remember her screaming in horror, and my son just looking and putting his arm around her and saying, trying to walk her away, trying to get her out of the room, trying to get her out of the situation. And so I called the police. I'm going to say that I called the Delaware State Police. I need to say that for what I'm about to say next. And so when they arrived, it was two male police officers. I'm just going to say I felt more victimized by the police when they got there than I did by the abuser. When they got there, the first thing first of all, one stayed with me, one went into the house. And I was told later that that's how it was supposed to be. And so the one that stayed with me was like, what happened? I told him what happened. All the whole story I just told you. And then he says, do you want to press charges? The fear and intimidation and the Stockholm syndrome, which some victims of abuse want to protect the abuser, right? So I wanted to protect the abuser from the humiliation of having to walk out of the house in front of the kids with handcuffs. I wanted to protect him from that. So I said no. I also didn't want the children to see that. So I said, no, I don't want to press charges. In the meantime, I'm calling my husband. I'm calling people that are close to me. My husband is having a whole heart attack because this is the only time he wasn't ever with me at a drop off. And he's like, what do you mean you don't want to press charges? You need to press charges. By that time, that cop that was talking to me already went into the house. I was told by an expert that wasn't protocol. Protocol is one cop stays with the woman, the other cop gets the story from the man. You don't both go into the house with the man. So they both went into the house, and they were both in there with him at one point, and I was by myself. When the cop came back out, he says, yeah, we're not. I said, I want to press charges. He said, no, we're not doing that. And I said, why? I want to go ahead and press charges. He said, no, because he told you to leave. I said, sir, as he was attacking me, he was saying that, right? Did you hear the part about how I said I didn't even want to come in the house? Like, he made me come in the house, and he attacked me in front of the children. Yeah, he because you wouldn't leave, so he was putting you out because you refused to leave. I said, that's not the story, and I just told you what happened. And so they refused to press charges.
Wow.
I wrote a letter to the governor. I'd never heard back from the governor's office. I wrote a letter to, I don't remember which troop it was, so I don't want to be incorrect, but in Delaware, they have troops. So the troop that those police officers were from, I wrote a letter to who was over that troop, and they had their domestic violence person call me. And she was representing them, so it didn't really get anywhere. But that's how deep this runs in terms of the systems, right? So I had to go to, they had a domestic violence section at the family courthouse. They helped me to get a protection from abuse order written, PFA. I got that written. But the loopholes in the system really don't make us feel protected.
Right.
You know that there are women who've had PFAs out against their abusive partners who have been murdered. The protection from abuse order says they can't have firearms anymore while the protection from abuse order is in place. But, right, my abuser was still able to go back to work at a school with children. My abuser was still able to go back to his church organization and be a leader there. I wanted so badly to send my PFA to those two places, but I had to let God fight those battles for me. But the system should have said, okay, what do you do for a living? You work with children. You cannot work with these children. We need to send this to your employer. We need to send this to your church. I mean, this abuser was still able to be enabled by the people in his circle, by the system that didn't, I'm grateful that he didn't have firearms. But he still violated the PFA at least one time. And I had to, call my local police department to enforce the PFA. We need more protection for women than just a piece of paper.
Yeah. Wow. This has shed so much light on something that we're aware of but not aware of.
Sure.
And I am so grateful that you have taken the time to sit down and to talk to us about your personal experience and how it impacted you at that time. And I don't know how it's still impacting you at this point, because I know that you are on an active healing journey. Always.
For sure.
Always. So I don't know where you are in that space, but I know what I see and what I experience with you, and it's not the same person from then. A more empowered woman, a pioneer, a woman who wants to set other women, individuals free. And so I am sad that you had to go through that. But like you said earlier, the Lord knows who to consider for what.
I love that.
Yes. He knows who to consider for what. And so I just appreciate you so much. And I know that so many people will be blessed from this conversation. And so as I end every episode, you are fearfully and wonderfully made. You were made on purpose. You have a hope and you have a future. And so we just want to use this platform to empower you with purpose. I hope that you have learned something, and I hope that you have some great takeaways, and I hope that you are blessed. Until next time, walk in purpose.